On April 11th, 1912, roughly 2,200 people set sail on the largest moving object ever built by human hands, a floating palace of mahogany, brass, and electric lights, a ship so massive that walking from bow to stern took nearly 15 minutes. Most of those passengers, they weren't millionaires, they weren't celebrities. They were middle-class travellers, teachers and clergymen and honeymooners, spending their life savings on a ticket that promised them the voyage of a lifetime. This is what daily life was actually like as a second-class passenger aboard RMS Titanic. Quick thing before we set sail. If you're one of those people who actually falls asleep to these, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. And I'm always curious. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Last week, someone said they were on a cruise ship listening to this. A cruise ship, listening to a Titanic story. I still think about that. All right, we're heading back to April 1912 tonight. But hold on, get yourself comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. Your eyes open slowly. For a moment, you're not entirely sure where you are. The gentle hum beneath you. The slight sway. Then it comes back to you. You're aboard the RMS Titanic. Second-class cabin, somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Not your bed at home, not your familiar bedroom with the creaky floorboard by the door. This is a bunk made of solid mahogany, polished to a rich shine, with sheets so crisp they practically crackle when you shift beneath them. And unlike your drafty room back in London, this cabin feels almost cozy. The White Star Line has apparently spared no expense. You sit up slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the soft light filtering through the porthole. Early morning, April 11th, your first full day at sea. Yesterday was boarding day at Southampton, and honestly, the whole thing passed in such a blur of porters and customs inspections and jostling crowds that you barely remember any of it. You do remember walking up the gangway, though. That part stuck with you. The ship had looked massive from the dock, impossibly massive, like someone had taken an entire city block and decided to float it on the ocean. The hull stretched on forever in both directions, painted black and white and gold, still gleaming with that new ship shine. Millions of rivets dotting the steel plates, each one hammered in by hand by some poor soul in Belfast. You'd stopped at the threshold, looking back one last time at the crowd waving from the pier, and then stepped aboard. Into what felt less like a ship and more like a hotel that had gotten seriously lost. Wood-panelled corridors, electric lights, stewards in crisp white uniforms smiling and nodding as passengers shuffled past with their luggage, everyone looking slightly dazed, slightly overwhelmed, everyone getting hopelessly turned around in the maze of staircases and passages. You'd found your cabin eventually, dropped off your case, raced topside to watch the big hemp ropes being cast off. And slowly, so slowly you could barely feel it, Titanic had begun to drift away from England. That was yesterday. Today you intend to actually explore this floating palace. Your roommate is already awake, a young man from Argentina, dark hair falling across his forehead as he hunches over a book at the mahogany dressing table by the bed. You've exchanged a few words since boarding, pleasant enough fellow, travelling alone on his way to his brother's wedding in New York. But he seems more interested in his studies than conversation, which suits you fine. There's something restful about sharing space with someone who doesn't feel the need to fill every silence with chatter. You swing your legs over the side of the bunk and take stock of the room. It's not first class, obviously. You've heard the papers going on about the parlour suites up there, private promenades, sitting rooms with fireplaces, the sort of accommodations that cost more than your entire yearly salary. But this cabin would have been first class on any other ship you've sailed on. You took a voyage to Canada a few years back on the Empress of Britain, and your first class cabin on that ship was roughly equivalent to what you're looking at now. The walls are painted a glossy white enamel over oak panelling, clean, bright. The furniture is solid mahogany, not the cheap pine you'd expect in second class. There's a proper dressing table with a wash basin built right in, a mirror, storage shelves with plenty of space for your toiletries. Not cramped at all. In fact, it feels almost spacious. And then there are the little touches that remind you this ship was built for a new age. The electric lights, for instance. You discovered last night that they actually turn themselves off when you leave the room and switch back on when you enter. Some sort of clever clip mechanism attached to the light and the door. You spent a good 5 minutes testing it, opening and closing the door like a child with a new toy, watching the lights flicker on and off. Your roommate had looked up from his book with an expression that suggested he thought you might be a bit simple, but honestly. Automatic lights, what will they think of next? You pull on your clothes, run a hand through your hair, splash some water on your face from the basin. Your stomach is rumbling. Breakfast time. You bid farewell to your roommate, who barely glances up from his reading, and step out into the corridor. The ship's interior is quieter this early in the morning, most passengers still in their cabins, probably. You pass a steward carrying a stack of fresh towels, and he nods politely as you go by. The wood-panelled walls seem to glow in the electric light. No gas lamps here, no soot or smoke, just clean, steady illumination that makes the whole place feel somehow modern, somehow new, like the future itself has been stuffed into a hull and set afloat. You're heading for the second-class dining saloon, but you decide to take a small detour first. There's a library on this ship, an actual library with actual books, and you want to locate it now so you can find your way back later. You've got plans for that library. A helpful steward points you in the right direction. Down the promenade deck, he says, just past the entrance, can't miss it. You make your way along the deck, enjoying the view of the ocean through the windows. Grey morning light, a bit of chop on the water, nothing serious. The ship barely seems to notice, moving through the waves with a steadiness that surprises you. On your last voyage, the Mauretania, the vibration from the engines had been so intense that your water glass had actually rattled its way across the dinner table and dumped itself directly into your lap. Very dignified. Here, though, you can barely feel the engines at all, just that low, constant thrum beneath your feet, reassuring, almost, like a heartbeat. And then you hear the music. You round a corner and stop. A small crowd has gathered outside what must be the library entrance, and there, in the middle of the crowd, is a string quintet. 5 musicians in neat dark suits playing a lively tune that echoes off the wood-panelled walls. You think you recognise the violinist. Dark hair, focused expression, bow dancing across the strings with easy confidence. You saw him a couple of years ago, playing aboard the Mauretania, Wallace Hartley, if you remember right. The same Wallace Hartley. It hadn't occurred to you that ships would have the same musicians crossing back and forth, but of course they would. This is their job, their livelihood, playing for passengers who might toss a few coins their way if the music is good enough. You watch for a moment as a small satchel is passed around the crowd. Tips for the band, someone murmurs, just like you. They're travelling as second-class passengers. The White Star Line pays for their passage, but not much else. So tips from their fellow passengers are genuinely appreciated. You fish a few pennies from your pocket and drop them into the satchel. The music swells around you. Schumann's Happy Farmer, you think. Cheerful, energetic, a good way to start a morning at sea. You linger a moment longer, letting the music wash over you, watching the other passengers gathered around, men in tweed suits, women in walking dresses, children tugging at their parents' hands, wanting to get closer to the musicians, everyone smiling, everyone looking slightly amazed, as if they can't quite believe they're standing on the deck of a ship in the middle of the